like us to think about this message from this standpoint, that we know how to pray.
Yeah.
The title of the message is What Hastens the Judgment of God. And as we consider the things that are going on in the world now and the things we see all across the globe, the wickedness, the trouble, it seems like men's hearts fixed just on doing evil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like Noah's time, when men's heart would seem to be on evil continuously. And as God is observing everything that's going on in the world, he already knows when the end is. We don't know. But as Jesus told us, in the last days, certain things will take place, and we can see those things taking place. I'd like to first turn to Leviticus, the 18th chapter. I want to consider a few verses there. And in your own private devotion, it might be good to read the whole 18th chapter, because it speaks to some things that are taking place in our world today. But the verses that we are going to read are verses 24 through 30. And the writer is speaking about the fleshly relationships that exist between humans. And there were guidelines laid out on what God expected. And as the children of Israel was living in the regions that they sometimes seemed to pick up some habits that came from other nations.
Mm-hmm.
And we know these other nations were godless nations. So there were things in place that were contrary to what God would have to be.
Mm-hmm.
So let's begin reading at the 24th verse down to the 30th verse. Defile not yourselves in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you.
And the land is
The land is defiled, therefore do I visit the
thereof
iniquity thereof upon
upon it.
it.
The land itself,
The land itself vomiteth out her inhabitants.
Ye shall therefore
keep my statutes and my judgments.
shall not
commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you.
For all
these abominations have the men of the land done, which were before
the land
you.
is defiled.
The land is defiled.
That the land
spew not you also when you defile it,
as it spewed out
the nations that were before you.
For whosoever
shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them shall be cut off from among their people. Therefore shall ye keep mine ordinance, that ye commit not any of these abominable customs which were committed before ye, that ye defile not yourselves therein. I am the Lord your God. So as we consider the things that were the instruction that was given to the children of Israel, it known unto them, it was made known unto them that this wasn't the first time it came around. And as we look at the things that are going on in our societies, in our worlds today, the laws that are being made to change what is divinely right and set in order by God, it's not the first time. This has come about in other nations that have come long before we have been here in this place. And so as one of these things that take place, and it seems like every so often the enemy tends to push certain ideals and certain desires on people, and he tries to force it on everybody within a society. And we can see that this taking place. And then we begin to look at the things that are happening in the world. It said the earth would spew you out. And we wonder sometimes, why are some of these disasters going on? Well, man's got his solutions. Well, it's global warming. It's this, it's that. No, it's the earth looking at your wickedness and it's spewing you out. That's what it is. And man seems to fail to recognize that the earth, the way God made the earth, God made it perfect, and he made it to foster life and to give us an environment which to grow and to develop and also to mature spiritually. And as the earth sees these things happen, all of a sudden we see these things taking place. Mm-hmm. Earthquakes in places you never heard them before. Mm-hmm. Storms in places you never heard them before. Changes in the environment. And men say, oh, well, it's global warming. God made the earth to be able to correct any weather disorder that exists in it. But what we're looking at is we're looking at the wickedness of men, and the earth is began to spew them out. And they were given a warning. Don't take all this into yourselves. There are places in which people go to church, and these alternative lifestyles are supported in the church. And it is not what God wants. He warned the children of Israel, don't take these abominations that men have done, which were before you, because it will defile the land. Mm-hmm. When we take the time to pay close attention to what is happening in nature, sometimes we can realize and understand that is not a normal thing that normally happens. Mm-hmm. California is used to getting rain. What normally happens in California, they have a couple seasons of rain. Now, they have been on an extended drought for not only, I don't know how many years now. The lakes are at all-time lows. They issue a warning for Lake Mead because of levels so low. And then the news that the same weather system that has been over the late spring and summertime is going to back again, and it's going to cause there not to be rain in California. Yeah. Why? Does anybody stop to think, why is this happening in our state? And if we begin to look at the things that that state supports, that the government of that state supports, it's wickedness. And they're trying to push that upon everybody else. They were the first ones to take the lead on it. And we wonder why there's no rain. God has to say, what can I do to get this people attention to let them know they have erred from my ways? And so he withholds the rain. Now, I was talking to a man there in California, and he seemed to have some knowledge about weather. It seemed to be a hobby of his, and he was telling me how it normally works. He said the systems that the wind currents that normally come through there, it comes through California off the ocean, passes over Nevada, comes through Arizona, and then hits us here in New Mexico. He said, this is where you get your rain from. And I got to thinking about that. And so as I drove home, I was looking up in the sky, and the sky there was not one cloud all the way from when we left California to the New Mexico border. And then I noticed something. There was a wall of clouds that reached from northern New Mexico all the way to southern New Mexico. And I said, isn't that interesting? Now, people look at that and they say that's an anomaly. No, that's the hand of God. I'm going to put rain where I want to put it. And we haven't missed out, have we? We've had our normal summer rains. But you know what? Our particulars is beginning to support some of the same things that California supports. And what does it say? The land is defiled. Why did we have an earthquake in northern New Mexico last week? Is this a place where there's normally earthquakes? There isn't. And it caused me to think, the earth will spew you out. Job, the 2nd chapter. There's one particular verse we're going to focus in this particular book, the 20th chapter of Job, but in your own homework, it would be good to read this particular passage, the whole chapter, as this particular person was talking about the course of man. And he was bringing all these things to try to get Job to think about, is there anything that you've done to cross God? Is there anything that you have done that would cause this calamity to be on you? Zophar spoke all these things. Not going to get into all of them, but what he was talking about, in essence, is other gross sins. Human sacrifice, idolatry, hypocrisy, unjust gain, violence, and wickedness. These are all the things that he covered in this chapter. And then in verse 27, this is what he said.
The heaven shall
reveal his iniquity,
and the earth
shall rise up against him. Now that is not a complicated verse. It don't take too much intellect to understand that if I'm a wicked person, eventually the earth is going to rise up against me. Look at all these empires that have come before us. The Babylonian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Chinese Empire. All these things have come before us and they all went down. And why did they go down? The heaven shall reveal his iniquity. You know, there wasn't no cameras on the streets in those times. There wasn't IP addresses that could be tracked in that time. There was no cameras on police officers. There wasn't people governing the streets. And people did all kinds of things and they thought it was hid. They thought it was out of the sight of everyone. But you know what? God is watching. Yeah. The heaven is watching and the earth is watching. And it knows when iniquity is there. When we think about between Cain and Abel both offered sacrifices to God. One was acceptable, one wasn't. And when Cain realized it was not acceptable, all he could do was turn his eyes on his brother in envy. And that envy got the best of him out there and he slew his brother Abel. And what did God tell him? He said the earth, his blood cries out to me. The blood of all things, all kind of injustices and things that have happened, murders and killings, they're crying out to God right now. We studied in our lesson last week the statistics on abortion. Over 42 million babies aborted across the world last year. And I said, how many years has abortion been around? It's nothing new. It was in empires way back then. They knew how, if they didn't want a child, to get rid of it. And so when you begin to total up all of those over time, their blood is crying out to God. And it said the earth shall rise up against him. So these are the things we have to consider what hastens the judgment of God. God has a set and appointed date and time for the judgment, but that does not mean he won't use the things in this earth to bring judgment at certain times. A building collapses and over 100 people are killed in Florida. As I thought about that, I said, God could have held that building up. Yes. Even though it was shoddy engineering and shoddy construction work, God still could have held it up. Not only that, he could have told every single person in the area where it was going to fall, don't enter the building, there's something wrong. And that building could have fell with no one in there. But he didn't. He allowed those people to go on with their lives, and it was their judgment time. It was the time when their life would be lost. Did God build where the flood occurred in Germany? Yes. Man put all their buildings and their roads and all that in there, and maybe never thought, what happens if there's going to be a big flood that comes through here? How are we going to deal with the water? Could not God have created an avenue for that water to run? No, he put it in the course that it ran, and it had a purpose to bring judgment there. It was to get people to understand what is going on. The wickedness is taking place in this place, and the earth is rising up against you. But people don't consider that. You have to first recognize and acknowledge that there is a God in order to be able to think about that in that way. Not only that, you have to be able to realize and understand I am responsible for the way I live. And if God has put some things in place that he doesn't want us to cross, the lines, he calls them abominations, that means that it's going to cause us trouble if we end up in those things. And we have a world full of people in those things. You can't go in a store without seeing it. Go to get my hair cut. Ain't that many people in the mall, but who's parading around? As if to flaunt it. Look at us. Look at us. We're our way. You know the earth is going to rise up against that particular mindset. And you can't really anything to people because they become so sensitive to when they get instruction or correction. But the earth is going to rise up against it. What happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? The angels came. I'm going to go down there and see what's going on in there to see if what they're saying is happening. And those people in that city was trying to go after the men that went down there. That's true. It was so bad. Lot said, here, I got some daughters that you can have. Gross wickedness. And what did God do? He rained fire and brimstone down upon Sodom and Gomorrah. And you can't Sodom and Gomorrah now. The place where they used to be, all they could find was ruin. But we live in a world where people want to pay attention to God. They think they're smarter than God. Well, we can make a law in the state or in the whole country that you have to accept this now. Well, guess what? Your little law does not supersede God's law. Unless you have control over the soul and the body, life and breath, that's the only law that matters. Whether I want to make it convenient for myself or force it upon other people so they accept me as I am, it's gross wickedness. And the earth will rise up against you. Let's turn to Romans, the 1st chapter. Talk about reprobates a little bit. The definition for reprobate is a person without moral scruples. And I had to look up the word scruples. Scruples means conscience or sense. A preacher preached one time and he said, serving the devil will make you stupid. And I understand what he's talking about. Romans 1, verse 21 through 32.
Because that when they knew God,
they glorified not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was. Listen to this. Hold on a second. When they knew God, they glorified him not. Every single society that has had success in this world started off with a proper respect for God. A few that start off in idol worship and they didn't get far. You look at the Roman Empire, the main religious leadership was the Catholic Church. They used to follow the Bible closely. Did you remember last year when the Pope said alternative lifestyle is okay? How can you decide that when in Leviticus, God gave strong command that it's not okay, it's an abomination? And if you look at the history of the Roman Empire, you could see its decline. There was no need for an army to go in to take over the Roman Empire. You know how the Roman Empire was destroyed? From within. It went down because of where it was. Gross wickedness. And it could no longer support its empire, and it basically imploded on itself. We are in that dangerous place now in this country. Many of the things in our government are patterned after that empire. The organization is all after that. We started off with a good point. We started off people coming over here wanting to serve God. We had a constitution that was drawn up, Bill of Rights that was drawn up under the direction of what the Bible said. And how have we drifted from it? You can't even hardly recognize it anymore. Well, say, people used to be able to pray in school. Yeah. And what happened? Let's take that out. No more praying in school. And what's going on in schools? Violence. All kind of evil and unjust doctrines that are being taught that are contrary to what you want your children to believe in. We are in the same boat.
Yes.
There doesn't have to be a greater nation than us to take us down. Because if we continue on the course that we are on, we are going to implode from within. No one will have to attack us. We see attacks going on now. Let's bum rush the Capitol because we're in a disagreement with what's going on. Happen to the respect. Happen to understanding the position that God holds. He said, I set up kingdoms. He set this one up. And if we would have continued to glorify him and continue to be thankful, we wouldn't be in the boat we're in. Do you think that God could have squashed COVID?
Yes.
God knew COVID was there before they even knew. But he said, you know what? Man has a free will. And a few of them got together and meddling, didn't they? And now we got a problem. Why? Because they glorified not God. And neither were thankful. There seems to be something in a human being that does not follow God. They can't be satisfied with the way things are in life. They always seem to pursue some sort of wicked imagination that comes into their mind, we know comes from the devil. It said, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart were darkened. John?
Professing themselves to be wise.
Professing themselves to be wise.
They became fools.
They became fools. We can see this. It's not about me judging another person, but I can see that a particular person on a particular course, when God is not involved, we can see him act like a fool.
And change the glory of the uncorruptible God.
Change the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man,
and to birds,
four-footed beasts, and creeping things. There are societies and countries in this world that worship man-made images, have utter devotion to them, and they can't do a thing for them. You know what they do? Some of them, they go into those temples and they have these chants and They beat themselves and they scar themselves trying to get their God to hear them. Did they ever learn from Elijah and King Ahab, the prophets of Baal? I'm wise, but I have become a fool. If it didn't work for the prophets of Baal, what do you think it's going to do for you? And we saw the result. Elijah called up to heaven. They put water on the sacrifice, and God consumed the whole thing and clicked up the water too. Yet man hasn't learned from that. Well, we should have been paying attention to Elijah. Because the contest, the dispute was settled way back then. Read on.
Wherefore God also gave
them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their bodies between themselves.
Who changed the truth
of God into a lie, worshipped and served the creature more than Creator,
who is blessed forever.
There is a danger when you are your own God. Mm-hmm. When something other than the supreme God of the universe is your God, you are going to lose your way grossly. And the enemy is going to take advantage of it. He's going to take you down to a devil's hell. That's his whole purpose. And we got a lot of people in this world that's headed down that road, don't even realize it, how close they are to it. And once you get in there, there's no coming back. Read on.
For this cause,
God gave them up to vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use, that which is against nature.
And likewise also the men,
leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust, one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving themselves that recompense of their error, which is me. We know what that is. It's called homosexuality. Yes. The earth is going to rise up against that spirit. I don't know if you are familiar with Pompeii. Pompeii was a large city in the Greece area. And they were given into these same appetites and these same behaviors. And God allowed a volcano to take that whole place out. And where it used to be is underwater now. And they sent divers down, and they could see the palace pillars and stuff down in the water. And you think God's going to let it slide over here? No. God wants to have mercy. He said he'll have mercy on whom he'll have mercy, compassion on whom he'll have compassion. But that is an abomination, and God is against it. And not only will God judge it, the earth will rise up against it. And men and women are running around scratching their head. What's wrong with our world? It used to be so much better than this. Why don't you think about it just a little bit? Where are you with God? That's the question. God who? Well, there's your answer. What's wrong with the world? You done dismiss God. Yeah. Read on.
And even as they did not like
to retain God in their knowledge, this is a dangerous place. God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. Now, the definition of a reprobate mind is a person without moral conscience or sense. Mm-hmm. So is there a chance for them to change? A very slim chance. Because God has already said, I'm going to let them live, but I'm going to take away their moral compass. And they can do whatever they want to do. And what he's doing is he'll just preserve it till the final day of judgment. But many of them will go out into eternity long before that.
Yes.
You remember when HIV came around?
Mm-hmm.
From that behavior? And people was getting scared. Those that had dabbled in that stuff, they was worried about dying then. And a whole lot of people died from it too. But yet, did it change the minds of men and women? No, they continue on down that course. And now it's being pushed in every direction. What we need to do is make sure that our children understand where God stands on that behavior.
That's right.
Because they are going to see it more than we see it.
That's true.
And they're going to have to be able to say with a clear conscience and with authority, it's not right. It's an abomination to God.
Amen.
Can Jesus deliver them from that situation? Yes, he can.
Yes.
But for most people, it's very slim. Because once they get into that particular lifestyle, it doesn't seem like they want to change. I want to go flaunt it in the mall.
Yeah.
When they should be disturbed in their mind. I'm not even doing what's natural. Read on.
Being filled with
all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents,
without understanding,
covenant breakers, without natural effect, implacable and merciful, knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure to do them. This is called evil fullness. Everything that is mentioned here, that the apostle categorized, we can see in our world. We can see the evil fullness. And don't you think the earth is going to rise up? Wasn't there already a hurricane this year or tropical storm they was worried about? Well, this particular weather system that is going to repeat itself in California, guess what? It affects the other side too. And they get an abnormal increase in tropical storms. So what do you think's coming this winter?
There's some flooding in New York.
Will people pay attention to it? That storm swept all the way up to New York, flooded out the subway. New Yorkers thought, well, we don't have to worry about hurricanes up here. Yeah, you do have to worry about it. The earth will rise up against you. And as we look at these things and see these things taking place, yes, we ask Lord to have mercy, but we need to recognize it's the sign of the times.
Yes.
There is wickedness everywhere. And the earth is rising up and it's trying to spew out the wickedness that's in it. Because it was made by a holy God. And you know that God made this earth to be a holy place?
Yes, he did.
Look at the way he created the Garden of Eden. Everything was perfect. Everything was in its place. Everything was in order. And now we live in a world full of wickedness and the earth is trying to spit it out. This has to do with this message, but I want you to get this picture. When that whale had Jonah in his mouth, that wasn't what he was normally eating.
No.
And it said how the whale went and spat him out. Now, God ordained that, but I want you to get that picture. That's like you and I, stuff we ain't supposed to eat. Your little children go out and play in the yard, and they grab that mouthful of dirt because they're curious what dirt tastes. And they start eating it, and then they realize it ain't good for me, and they're trying to spit it out, and you got all these little pebbles all in their mouth. And they don't know how to get them out. That's the way the earth is. It's evil. this creation that God made to be whole, to follow his ways according to what's natural and what's right. And all this evil is in our mouth.
Yes.
And the earth is trying to spew it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people say, God is going to let us keep going.
Mm-hmm.
If he wanted to destroy you, he would have already done it. God has an appointed time.
That's true.
Let's get Revelations 20th chapter. Unfortunately, there has been judgments in every century. Every society has experienced some sort of judgment from God. But there is one ultimate and final judgment.
Yes.
And this is what people need to understand is if you stay on this course, you're going to end up where you don't want to be. And then you're going to be down there thinking about, why did I let Satan take advantage of me like he did? And there will be no chance to change it. Revelations 20:11 through 15.
And I saw a great
white throne,
and him that
sat on it,
whose face the earth and the heaven fled away.
Whose face the earth and the heaven fled away.
And there was found no place for them.
There was found no place. Now, it says no man can see God and live. The writer said here, whose face the earth and heaven fled away from. This was God's face turning to the face of judgment. It's time to call the world to an end. And when he looked at it, it said the heavens and the earth fled away. It meant time had stopped. The tick-tock of the clock stopped. You ever had a clock that seemed to go around that was battery operated, and when the batteries ran out, it stopped on a time and it never moved again until you changed the batteries? That's what we're talking about. The time when you see the sun, we pass the sun, and it seems to rotate across the sky. Men in his foolishness used to think the earth was the center of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? Mm-hmm. Study that in history. They thought it was the center of the earth. The sun moves around. Do you know how big the sun is? We move around it. But it said there was found no place for them. Read on.
And I saw the dead, small and great.
I saw the dead, small and great.
Stand before
God. Now, it said small and great. This also covers every human being that ever walked this earth. Read on.
And the books were open.
Books were open.
And another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged.
Dead were judged out of those things that were written in the books
according to their works.
Notice it's two books. Mm-hmm. One has what we do, and the other is the book of life. Mm-hmm. Are we under the blood? That's the book of life. Mm-hmm. And it said we were judged out of both, which were written according to their works. Okay, listen to this verse.
And the sea gave up the dead, which and death and hell delivered up the
and
dead.
Hell delivered up the dead. Now that tells you and I there are people in hell right now. Yes. There are people in the grave. There are people in hell. There's some people in paradise. There's some people in hell. It said there are people in the sea. I want to spread my ashes over the sea. You ever wonder why a person wants to do that? Maybe they really love the sea. But most of the time, you probably think, if my ashes are over the sea, they're going to be so far apart, they'll never come back together. But you don't know God well enough. Because he's going to find every single particle out there somewhere in the ocean. He's going to bring it all back together. Do you know the people that burn in fires, they're going to be regenerated. And their body is going to come back. It said it gave up the dead which were in it, death and hell, delivered up the dead which were in them.
And they were judged.
Every man according. He didn't miss anybody. This is a future event. People want to know, well, what's going to happen in the world? Here's a good place to start. This is a future event that has been spelled out. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't kept from us. Everything that occurs, small and great, here's your chance to find out what happens. What do we have to do then? Well, if this is going to happen, then I have to believe that there's a God.
Yes.
And if I have to believe there's a God, then I have to believe that I'm responsible for how I live. Mm-hmm. And if I find myself in a place of abomination, I better be trying to get myself out of there. Read on.
And death and hell
were cast into the lake of fire.
This is the second
death.
And whosoever was not found in the
book of life
was cast into the lake of fire.
Now you can also think about it this way. We have two dispensations. So you have the book that has the deeds, and you got the book of life. Mm-hmm. We are under the grace dispensation, under the time when Jesus' blood was shed for the remission of sins. Our name will be in that book. You know that the people that died before the grace dispensation, they fall under the law. Mm-hmm. And their name is going to be in another book. And what they did. Mm-hmm. The judgment is based on when you were born, when you died. No one can say, well, you know what? It's too evil for me to live right. I just can't live that way. God said, my grace is sufficient. He didn't say it was sufficient, meaning past tense. He said it is. That means at every point in your life, he has enough grace for you to live right. The question is, will we put in for it? Mm-hmm. First of all, do I want to live right? Because you read over there in Romans, those people doing all things that said they enjoy doing them. So some people don't want to live right. Reprobates don't want to live right. It takes a whole lot of prayer and a mercy from God for them to decide, you know what? I'm dissatisfied with the way I'm living. Because they've reached a point, seemed like of no return. It's like going out and jumping a cliff. You follow it on the trail, there's a cliff, let me go jump off. Whee! That was so much fun. Was it that fun? It's a fleeting moment, just like everything else in life is a fleeting moment. Do we want to allow the fleeting moment to be where we get our satisfaction from, or will we kill that in our body? We got to bring our flesh under control. So what should our frame of mind be? 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter, verses 8 through 12.
But beloved,
be
not ignorant of this one thing.
Be not ignorant of this one thing.
That one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years.
That one day is with the Lord 1,000 years.
And 1,000 years is one day.
1,000 years is one day.
The Lord is not suffering to us,
but is long suffering.
Not that any should perish.
Not willing that any should perish.
But all should come to repentance.
All should come to repentance.
But the day of the Lord,
will come as a thief in the night,
in which the
heavens shall pass away with a great noise. The elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works therein shall be burned up.
Seeing then
that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness?
Looking for and hastening unto
the coming day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved,
the elements
shall melt with fervent heat. Now, a couple things here. It said 1,000 years is one day. One day is as 1,000 years with the Lord. I did a calculation. And I said, what would that be in our mind? And so I used 100 years, and it came out to be 2.5 hours. Most people don't live over 100.
No.
In God's eyes, our life is less than 3 hours long. And it seems so long to people. It seems like, oh, I'm going to be alive forever. It goes by fast.
It does.
You know that I have been alive for 1 hour, 1 1/4 hour in God's eyes?
Mm-hmm.
That's a sobering thought. And then it said, everything shall be dissolved. Look at all the effort man makes to make things beautiful in this world. Not only that, consider the periodic table with all the elements. It said the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Now, you've been in chemistry class, and you know what some of the melting temperature is for some of them elements. So that tells me if all of those elements are going to melt with fervent heat, it's going to be hot. Beyond what we can even imagine or comprehend. If you could take the temperature of the sun, it might be that high.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is going to be around? I spent all my life creating this great wonder. I think about some of the places that people flock to in this country and other countries, that people have spent billions and trillions of dollars developing and creating to get people to come there and spend money. And it's all going to melt with fervent heat. It won't even be around a minute. All that effort. What if they took that same effort and learned what God required of them? Where would they be? We have to consider this sometimes. The enemy wants us to get wrapped up in everything that we got to do in life. But the most important thing is we got to get ready to meet God. Because when that end comes, that's it. And he said, seeing then that all things be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye be in all holy conversation and godliness? Now, the godliness is how we live. The conversation is what comes out of our mouth. You know where the devil gets most people? Right here.
Mm-hmm.
This little instrument that we use. That's where he gets most people. Because we don't think about sometimes the things we say when we say them. Maybe we say them in the heat of emotion or whatever it might be. You know who's paying attention? God is paying attention, and so is the earth. You remember the people that built the Titanic? This is unsinkable. God himself can't sink it. If I was one of the passengers scheduled to be on that boat and I heard that statement, I would have canceled my ticket. Because you know it's going down. And what happened? What sunk it? A small scratch in the side of the hull from an iceberg. God didn't even have to put his hand on it and smash it down. He said the route they take, there's icebergs. And most icebergs travel where? Under the water. They didn't even know where they was going. Trying to navigate. Oh, there's one there. We can see that one. And break. I wonder what that person that said God himself can't sink. I wonder what they said the next day. You ever thought about that? He probably said, I shouldn't have said that. So you see how careful we have to be with what we say? God's looking down in every situation. He's in every single household, all across this entire world, and he hears every single conversation. Not only that, he hears the thoughts and the intents of our hearts. So sometimes we realize we get smart enough to say, you know what, I shouldn't say what I'm thinking. God already knows what you was thinking. And he's going to hold you accountable for what you're thinking too. So we got to be careful. The enemy said, I can't get them to go into alternative lifestyle. I can't get them to go into gross sin. But I can sure get them to get their mouth going. And then, once it gets going, I'm going to slip something in there and trip them up.
We're going to give account for every idle word, no matter
That's right. Jesus said, let your yea be yea and your nay, nay, because anything else cometh evil. So we have, sometimes it's good just yes, no. That's the best answers we can do. And if we don't know how to respond, we need to be quiet and wait. I don't know how to respond. Give me some time to think about it. That's a maturity that we need to have. One more script, 2 Corinthians, the 7th chapter. Or two more. We'll read the first verse and then drop down to number 11.
Having therefore these promises,
dear beloved,
let us cleanse ourselves.
Let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God.
For behold, this self-same
thing that you sorrowed after a godly sorrow,
it wrought in you.
It brings a carefulness.
Yea, what clearing of yourself.
It brings a clearing of yourselves.
What indignation.
It brings an indignation.
Yea, what fear.
What fear.
Yea, what vehement desire.
What vehement desire.
Yea, what zeal.
What zeal.
Yea, what revenge.
What revenge.
In all things ye have approved yourselves.
In all things ye have approved yourselves to be clear in this matter. This is talking about how we keep our lives clean. If I know that God has all these promises for me to help me be an overcomer, to help me be able to live like I should, to give me the grace I need from day to day, to help me deal with this situation and that situation. If I know all that, I should be working and keeping clear. I don't have no excuse. God held up his end of the bargain. Christ held up his end of the bargain. The Holy Ghost is holding up his end of the bargain. The only question is you and I. It's like you got that room in the house where you put everything that you don't know what to do with. And then men, it's in the garage, that shelf you use to put everything that you don't know what to do with. And you never clean it. And the dust piles up on it. And pretty soon you don't even know what's in there. The only way you're going to know what's in there is you go out there and you take inventory and see what's actually there. We have to do that in our spiritual life. It's good to do it every day because then it's still on your mind. You ever go to bed and wonder why you can't go to sleep? And then God brings, you know what? I said something I shouldn't have said. He don't let you go to sleep till it's fixed. That's what that's for. To clear it up. Well, I was right in what I said. Were you? God gave you authority to say that? You justify where you are, that you felt it was okay? All this he had for us. The only thing we can do in these situations is just humble down. I was wrong. And if we begin to do that, especially from day to day, and as we deal with individuals in our life, there's going to come a time where we're going to learn to be a whole lot more careful than we are. Because we're going to get tired of having to go, Lord, I did it again. I couldn't control my tongue. What does Proverbs say about our words? Apples of gold,
Pictures of silver.
pictures of silver.
Fitly spoken.
Word fitly spoken. That's what we got to be like. That's what God expects. Anything else is going to get us in trouble. That's why Jesus said, let your yea be yea and nay, nay. Keep it simple. Well, you don't talk much. Well, there's a reason why I don't talk much. If I know that I have a trouble, I have a weakness, that I can't control my tongue, go back to that Romans. Boasters. I can't control my tongue. Boasters. That's tied to the tongue. Deceit. That's tied to the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Whisperers. That's tied to the tongue.
Let's see.
Without understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That's tied to our tongue sometimes. Say something that I don't really understand. I don't understand everything that's going on, and I done said something about somebody, and I don't even know what's happening. We get ourselves in trouble. We have to be very careful, because you ever listen to talk radio?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that a few times, and I'm like, this person has a whole lot to say about stuff they ain't even doing. And it's just on and on and on. I said, I wonder if that person is ever quiet. Do they ever just go home and don't say nothing and think about, man, what did I say today? And say we got 50,000 words. Some of us have more than others. Some of us may break that threshold. It's important that we learn how to control it, because that's where the enemy's going to get us. And then it's going to show up in our book. And if we're not careful, God can send us a reprobate mind in that category too. Well, they can't never be quiet. I'm just going to let them have their way and do and say whatever they want to say. People in the world like that. They couldn't be quiet if somebody told them, I'll give you $1 million to be quiet for 10 minutes. And it would hurt them to be quiet. It would be a great distress. But we don't want to be like that. You notice when Jesus was around, Jesus wasn't always just speaking to everybody. He had certain points when he would teach. Most of his time he wanted to do, he's praying. But he told us how important it is that we keep our words. It's coming. And what hates the judgment of God sometimes, the man said is unsinkable. God himself can't sink it. That wasn't keeping his tongue.
No.
What he should have said, it's a pretty good ship. One of the best ones we've and left it at that. And maybe they would have had a safe journey. But every time man has to boast in himself, say, well, God can this, God can't do that. You better look, because judgment's coming. We live in a time of gross evil and wickedness. And we can see it everywhere. It's in the news. It's in the paper. We can see it with our own eyewitness. The behaviors of people is perplexing. And I understand why the old people sometimes say, it has never been like this in my lifetime. They used to be way better. And we come up, and if we're not careful, it's normal. Mm-hmm. And that's what the devil wants. He wants it to be normal to us. That wants you to accept, that's just the way they are. Well, the law lets them be that way. It's still, we have to rebuke it. It's an abomination. It's displeasing to the Lord. God said it this, or the scripture said it this way: He that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him is sin.
That's right.
So that pretty much covers everything in life. Nobody can say, well, the Bible says you can't do this, you can't do that. It doesn't say I can't do this and I can't do that. To him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not is sin. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to pay attention to. Pray for you.
Amen.
Luke 4:04.